Welcome back to Murder in the Black. This is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime story for today.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, or your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it. The title of our case today is Buried in Lies, the murder of Martre Coles. Now, today's story takes us into the heart of Richmond, Virginia, a place of Southern charm and deep rooted families. But in the spring of 2017, what began as any ordinary day in the woods unraveled into one of the most heartbreaking and twisted murder cases that we've covered here, or that I want to say I've researched here. And so this is the story of Martre Coles. April 2nd, 2017, a man on his work break decides to take a walk through the woods, which I thought was interesting that he wanted to take a walk through the woods on his work break, but neither here nor there. He's hoping for some fresh air, just get away from the scene of the day, the work, the grind. But what he ends up finding is anything but peaceful. Something catches his eye, a shoe sticking out of a Rubbermaid storage bin. And this is like those Rubbermaid storage bins that you like put in your garage and you store things, probably about medium size. Steph, you know what I'm talking about? Do you use them in your garage to store things?
I mean, I'm only thinking of big ones. So if it's not big, then no.
Well, they can be big, they can be small, they can be medium, but they're usually things that you use to store away items. I typically think of them as going in your garage, but honestly, they could go anywhere. Well, this guy, he walks closer, he lifts the lid up, and I thought that was interesting that he was curious enough to walk closer and lift the lid up, but he does, and that's when he sees it. It's a body folded into the tote like an accordion, is how they described it. He was covered in a strange white powder. So he does what I think most people would immediately do, and that's call 911, and he waits for help. Now, when investigators arrive, they find a young black male whose limbs were tightly stuffed inside this storage bin. And the white substance that they saw, or that man saw on top of him, was lime, which is a chemical used to delay decompensation. But in this case, it's likely used to confuse investigators. The investigators thought that maybe the person that put the lime on top of him that did this crime used it to make it harder to determine when and how he died.
They carefully preserve the scene, rolling the bin over onto a white sheet. The back of the victim's wrists are bound. They have purple duct tape. There's no bruises, no visible trauma, but this is no accident. They believe it is a murder. They check the missing persons report and find a potential match. Martre Coles was reported missing 20 days earlier by his sisters. DMV records confirm it. The body in the bin is 19-year-old Martre. And yet the police don't notify the family. Not right away. They need time to figure out who did this and why, and they don't want to tip off any suspects. I want to talk about who Martre was. He was born on October 22nd, 1997. He was the youngest of 8 children, a quiet soul, sensitive, funny, brilliant. He loved art and wanted to design video games. He was a mama's boy through and through. But in 2014, tragedy struck. His mother, Karina, died suddenly of a heart attack. Martre was devastated. His siblings had all moved out, leaving him alone with his grieving father, Maurice. The grief was heavy and all-consuming. Maurice found comfort in a coworker her name was Denise Gay. A single mother of 5, supportive, loving, she was there for him in his time of need. And before long, she moved in with Maurice and brought her youngest daughter with her.
Before I dive into a little bit more about Martre, how do you feel about the fact that Maurice moved on so quickly?
Everybody moves at their own speed when it comes to grief. And I know we don't like to think or want people to move on quickly after something horrific happens, but it happens.
Yeah, and
So
I think to your point, Steph, I think that oftentimes, especially men who are used to having their wife help and do so many things that maybe they are not used to doing, right? Like, you know, if the woman was the cook, which is not always the case in all relationships, but if she was and you're in this dynamic, you're used to that and you don't really know how to navigate going back to that because it's been so long that you've had to do it. So it's like you have a dependency, so to speak, on and in needing, you know, a guy, a woman to come in and fulfill that role, to step in and do that role. Now, at first, things were okay. Martre started to come out of his grief. He was really struggling at first before Denise moved in, but once Denise moved in and after a few months, he started to really warm up to Denise and he got close to her kids. And a lot of that was because his siblings were so much older than Martre. Martre was the youngest, but he wasn't just the youngest. I mean, his siblings were in their 20s, had their own families. And so he was like the baby of the family for sure. And so now having Denise and her daughter, and then also her other child, he kind of really fell for this whole family unit and just really also welcomed having Denise, who was a mother like figure in his life. And in addition to warming up to Denise and her family, he also fell in love with the girl. And that, you know, changed his whole perspective. And he was ready to just pursue bigger and brighter things. He applied to college and even had a tour scheduled at Full Sail University in Florida. But on March 12, 2017, Martre vanished. Now, his sister, Michelle, she dropped him off at home after a family birthday party. And he told her that he had to finish up on a art project that he was going to present to the university during his tour. Well, that night, Michelle received 8 missed calls, and all of them were from Martre's girlfriend. She was panicking. He wasn't answering his texts or calls, and this was really completely out of character for their relationship, right? Each relationship is different, but if you are in a relationship where you're texting your partner nonstop, and then all of us, like, that's how it goes every day. You text from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, you're and in between you are on calls with them. Well, it becomes completely out of character when that person just goes missing for hours at a time. And so because of this, Martre's girlfriend decides to reach out to his sister. Now, Michelle and her sister Marquisha, so both of them sisters of Martre, when they received this information and they heard how panicked she was, they decided to head to their dad's house just to see, like, what happened. Why is Martre not answering her calls and he's not answering ours or any of our text messages? And when they get to the door, Denise greets them and says calmly that Martre had already left, that in fact he had already left to go back to Michelle's house to retrieve his wallet. Now remember, he was at Michelle's house earlier that day for a family birthday party, and Michelle brought him home. Well, according to Denise, as he was sitting there, he realized that he was packing up all his things to go on the college tour. He realized that he had left his wallet at Michelle's house, and so he tells Denise, like, I need to go over there and get my wallet. According to Denise, hey, you guys just may have missed paths, like you guys probably just barely missed each other, but he's not here. Michelle heads back to her house to see if maybe he arrived while her and Marquisha were gone, but to their dismay, he had never arrived. They drove around their dad's neighborhood and their neighborhood looking for him, but there was nothing. So the next morning, they filed the police report. But he was 19 years old, Steph. So what does that mean?
he could go missing.
Yeah, he can go missing. We all know this. And it just kind of depends, right? Like on when police decide to treat it as a missing persons case, even when it's an adult. We've had cases where it's clearly an adult and they don't treat it like it's a missing persons case, but or they do treat it like it's a true criminal case. But in this particular case, they said like he has the right to go missing. You know, we'll file this, but we'll wait it out basically. And that's when something unexpected happened. The police basically filed this away and they're going to keep eyes on it, but they're not immediately or readily looking for Martre. And then that's when our friend who was taking a break in the woods discovers this Rubbermaid bin. As police begin to investigate this case and try to figure out what's going on, they don't immediately call Martre's family. In fact, they don't want to notify Martre's family about anything. So they bring them in, but they're not talking to them about him being discovered. They are talking to him about him being missing. And as the police are getting all the details they need to gather, they another police officer who's just in the vicinity of the investigators talking about Martre, they kind of peek their ears up a little bit because they recalled a strange phone call that they received just 2 weeks earlier from Denise Gray's home. It was a burglar alarm that had gone off at the Coles residence, and it was late. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And Denise's daughters were, in fact, home. One of them, her youngest daughter, who was 12 years old, had pulled the alarm and she was acting out. She was mad at her older sister who was watching her, and her older sister's name was Latoya. And so when the officers arrive on scene, because they have to, they are trying to calm this 12-year-old daughter down. This isn't their first interaction with this young girl. She's had issues before where they've had to come out. So they're kind of like trying to calm her down, bring peace between her and Latoya. And as they're walking away and they're leaving the scene, the 12-year-old daughter flags down one of the police officers. And all of this is caught on body cam footage. And this youngest daughter asked to speak to him privately, and what she ends up saying to him really becomes the thread that ties this case together, and is why these officers, when hearing the investigators talk about Martre, begin to say, hey, we may have some evidence that could lead you to the killer.
She revealed that she saw her mother kill her stepbrother. She said she had been watching TV when she heard a scream. She looked into Martre's room and saw Denise and her sister Latoya holding him down. Something white was on his face. Denise told her to go away, meaning the little sister, and she ran to her room. She peeked out again and saw Latoya pushing a plastic bin down the hallway. But when the police asked Denise about it, she brushed it off, claimed her daughter had an active imagination. And isn't that just what you would say? This is why we need to have a whole conversation, which we're not going to have it here, but we need to have a conversation just about believing children, right? Like we talk about believe everybody, but believe the children sometimes, take what they're saying seriously until you're able to disprove it is what I say. With that memory now haunting the detectives, which obviously they brushed it off as well, with no real definitive proof, detectives zero in on the suspects, which at this point is Denise and Latoya. But first, they talk to Martre's sisters without telling them that he's been found dead, of course. And they describe a changing relationship. At first, Denise was helpful, supportive, but over time, things soured. Her youngest daughter began tormenting Martre, picking fights, breaking his things, even stabbing him with scissors. And that's deep. And Denise covered for her daughter, always. Martre started believing Denise was orchestrating it all, the attacks on him, obviously, trying to drive a wedge between him and his father, and it was working. Then came the biggest red flag of all. Martre's girlfriend was trying to find him. She logged into his email. She found a thread from a Sheila Crenshaw at Full Sail, except the email was from a Gmail account. It was poorly written, which was naturally suspicious. Police contact Full Sail. There's no Sheila Crenshaw who was working there. Someone impersonated the school. and faked the emails. And it was starting to look a lot like Denise. Armed with this new information, police secure a search warrant. Denise isn't home, but what they find is telling. Martre's backpack, his computer, his art supplies, nothing packed, nothing prepared for a trip. Then Latoya shows up at the house and she was nervous. She avoids going inside and stays on the phone and then eventually leaves. Detectives tell her and she drives straight to a remote location where Martre's body was found, a place that had not been made public. And I think this is interesting because usually when you find, I wonder, and maybe MD, you can tell me this, but I wonder, usually, even if they are going to look into the family, they usually make it known that they're deceased. Was there something else that made detectives, other than just the normal course of an investigation, that made them hesitate on revealing to the family why they didn't say he was dead? Like, was, an internal reason that they obviously didn't tell anyone else?
Based on my research, it appeared that the main reason they did not tell the family is because they could not definitively rule out that the family was a part of this. For them, when they go in and they identify that this was Martre Coles, and that he had a missing report filed on him just a couple of weeks prior or a couple of days prior, they're like, did the sisters say that there was this missing persons case, or did they file this missing persons case to cover up that they really killed their brother? And also, and I think a lot of the reason why they were thinking this way is because of that line, that line that was found, that chemical that was found, all over him, to kind of make it seem like he had been deceased longer, or that he was, than what he really was, to make it seem like it didn't happen when it occurred. And so for police, that they felt it was important. They made a game time decision, the investigators, the lead investigator, that we're going to keep this as close to our hip as we can until we can rule out certain family members, right? Because that's who they felt probably had the most, that's who they felt most likely had the involvement in this case as a result of that missing persons case that they filed earlier.
Interesting. 5 days later, while they knew that his made a remote stop at the location that had not been made public, a hunting camera that was at this remote location captures a hooded figure returning to the site where Martre's body was found. And the camera was grainy, but an SUV is seen, and it looks just like Maurice Cole's vehicle. And that's when investigators dig into everyone's movements. Everybody's a suspect in the family now. Security footage, time cards, GPS, they rule out Maurice. And that is very good because, who wants their dad to be involved on a murder? But they're not able to rule out Denise.
Yeah, and Steph, they actually set up that camera when they followed Denise. Which, come on now, that they are novices in this case, right? Because here you are being served a warrant at your home. You come home, you park in your garage, you park in the parking spot, and you see that your house is surrounded by police officers. You walk up, they serve you with the warrant. We have a right to be here. We're searching for X, Y, and Z. You get to read the warrant and see that, hey, yep, they are legally authorized to be in this building, and you know that you likely may have had something to do with this. I mean, what does a innocent person do in that case? I guess is my question to you, Steph, before I go down my rabbit trail. What would an innocent person do?
Least at the very least, wait for my mom to get back home. I don't think I would leave the location and go anywhere else. I don't know that I would be super cooperative with law enforcement either. So,
Absolutely. I think
yeah.
an innocent person doesn't necessarily not push back. I think you can push back and say, I mean, why are you here? I think, I don't understand. You get flustered. And then you may call, either your mom or your partner or your attorney, hopefully your attorney. But what you don't do is then drive to the actual crime scene. Now, the crime scene that has not been made public, right? You actually drive to the remote location that's not been made public. And so when police do this, which kudos to the investigators, right? For having the just wherewithal to say, let's get in the car and let's trail her. Let's follow her and see where she's gonna go. But then when they realize, okay, she's here, it's not like she gets out the car, walks down to see if the body's there. She just kind of sits there. That's not enough. Is that circumstantial evidence? Absolutely. Is that enough to convict? I would say unlikely, right? So what investigators do, in light of knowing that this is probably not enough to like seal the deal, in a trial, they put up this camera, a hunting camera that's supposed to capture footage, like, you know, a ring camera is the best way that I can put it, right? And then here comes a day later, somebody in a hooded gear that walks down past the tree where the camera was to identify if that bin was still there. They weren't able to ID who that person was, but they were able to ID the actual license plate. So I just think that that is amazing. And like you said, they were able to rule out Maurice, the father, but they could not rule out Denise. Now she left work early that day. So they were able to, again, security footage was able to show that she was the one that left work early that day, because her and Maurice, that's how they knew each other. They worked at the same place, and apparently they shared, you know, they when they had the same work schedule, they would just ride together to their job. She leaves early. She gets in the vehicle, the SUV that was spotted at this crime scene, and she's caught on camera getting into that SUV. And then her cell phone also pings as she is driving right past the area where Martre's body was dumped. And they're able to, at that point, bring Denise in. And of course, she plays dumb. She's like denying everything because, you know, that's what you do. But they're like, we have enough. We have enough to arrest you. And they do. And then they go and they seek out Latoya, but Latoya actually fled the state. She ended up going to South Carolina, but they were able to arrest her there without incident. And she too did not confess. They were hoping that they could play that good cop, bad cop. You should confess before, you know, your mom does. Like, we got all this evidence, but Latoya, you know, stuck to her guns and she didn't say anything. And so at that point, they were able to bring in once they arrested Latoya and Denise. The investigators were confident that they had their suspects in custody. And at that point, they were also confident that Martre's sisters were not involved. And so that's when they brought Martre's sisters back in and they revealed to them that Martre was in fact deceased.
How long was that time frame? Was this over the course of weeks? Was this over
It
the
was,
course of a month?
well, in terms of them identifying that it was Denise and Latoya that were their suspects, that was like a week. When I say these investigators did their big one in terms of investigating this case, they were on it. And honestly, right, they had some things that just fell in their lap that was off, like that worked in their favor, because I think they probably would have took longer. But with Denise's 12-year-old daughter, pulling the alarm on the house and the police coming out just the week, you know, before, those police not acting on it. I mean, and I don't want to say they didn't act on it. They did contact Denise and ask Denise about what their 12-year-old daughter said, what her 12-year-old daughter said, but they had nothing more than this young daughter's story. But of course, once Martre ended up deceased in a Rubbermaid storage bin, similar to what this 12-year-old daughter was describing on that camera recorded footage, that just really bursted things wide open for these investigators. And it it was about a week that they were able to start trailing these two, put the warrant out on the house, and then inevitably arrest them. Once they brought the sisters in, they were able to reveal to them not only that Martre had passed, but that Denise and Latoya were likely the people who inflicted this unimaginable pain that they were experiencing. And the question became at that point, what was the motive, right? Why did Denise do this? Why did Latoya and Denise kill Martre? Now, what they revealed or uncovered in their continued investigation of Denise is that she had a record of fraud and manipulation. She created that fake Full Sail email. So when they did that search warrant step on that house and they collected the laptops and the computers and all of that, they were able to see that she is the one that was sending the emails from Full Sail University to Martre, pretending like he had some college tour that he was supposed to be going to. And this was all in line with her record of fraud and her record of manipulation. They were also able to uncover that she recently researched GHB and asphyxiation. Now, prosecutors believe that she wanted Martre out the picture so that she could have Maurice, Martre's father, all to herself. So she drugged him and used her daughter to help subdue him. They stuffed him in a bin and then they disposed of him like garbage.
At the first trial, both women were convicted, but the jury hung on the first-degree murder charge. The state conducted another trial, and this time with new evidence. Maurice found Denise's purse, which held a shovel receipt and her phone. Messages between her and Latoya confirmed that they were trying to locate the body site days after the murder. At retrial, both were convicted of first-degree murder. Denise was sentenced to life plus 3 years. Latoya received 30 years. And of course, today they still claim their innocence. But the evidence, the emails, the GPS, the 12-year-old's account says otherwise. Martre Coles was a gentle, talented young man ready to step into his future, but the people closest to him who should have protected him became his killers. In the end, it was a child too young to carry the burden who told the truth and helped bring justice.
Final thought for this case is Martre's call. It's just an example of how grief, manipulation, and control can fester into something unspeakably violent. Like in this particular case, Denise preyed not just on Martre, but she preyed on Maurice. And once she recognized that she was able to creep in the back door of Maurice's grief, because that's exactly what it was. He was grieving the loss of his wife. He was grieving the loss of his children's mother and felt probably hopeless and a whole host of other emotions. And you have women out there, Steph, that literally prey on men vulnerable like that, and vice versa, right? You have people who will prey on people's grief. And then she used that to get in. And then once she saw Martre as a barrier to be able to get what she fully wanted, access to Maurice and probably more money and just more of the lifestyle that she craved, she decided that he was expendable, right? And so then she used the very thing that he was pushing for, a future, to position him to be able to fall prey to her scheme, right? So she used his desire to go to college and pursue his art as a way to basically kill him. And so it's just, he sabotaged her, she sabotaged him. And then the most cruel thing of all, she used her children She used her oldest daughter to actually enact the crime, and then she used her youngest daughter to keep quiet, to keep silent about it. She weaponized trust. She weaponized fake opportunities. She weaponized her children, all in the goal, right, of getting the what she wanted. She was selfish. And it's just unfortunate because Martre deserves more than that. His life was worth more than that. And he deserves safety. He deserves support and a chance to thrive at this future that he wanted. And so I'm glad that we're able to share his story here on Murder in the Black.
We want to encourage you guys to continue to support us, and you can do that simply by leaving us a comment about what you think about this week's case or any case that you hear from us. You can leave us comments on Spotify, also Instagram, or you can simply DM us if you are shy. Either way, we want to hear from you. You can also go to YouTube to interact with us and see us on there, and as well as experience live pictures as we're talking about the case. Also, an update, we are doing somewhat of a weekly gathering of what happens inside of the Diddy case. So if you are that type of person where you just don't have time in the middle of the week and you're busy with work and school or whatever it is that you may be doing, and you want just a in-depth drop about what happened in the case overall, we want to make sure that you guys know we are doing that, and that is something we are doing on our paid subscription. I've said it again and I said it before. We do have a 3-day free trial on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you're on Spotify, you get to interact with us via video over there. And we also have tons of binge-worthy content on our paid subscription. If you're just looking for extra, we have over 50 episodes on our paid subscription. We want to encourage you guys to do that if you're interested. Our first one is dropping this week. That is what is up over here on Murder in the Black. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black, and we will see you guys next week.